Jesus, thank you so much for this day. Thank you that we're able to come to the Mace's house, and please bless me as I speak and speak through me. In your name, amen. 750,000 to 1 million people commit suicide yearly. Why do people commit suicide? Because they see no reason for continuing to live. If you have no purpose, then why do you live? So this is something I started thinking about a couple weeks ago. What is the purpose of life? It's like I thought, oh, I should have this figured out already. But I was thinking about it, it's like, I didn't really have a distinct answer when I thought of it. So I decided to start looking up things. So one thing out of curiosity, I looked up, this was after I had already looked up stuff in the Bible and Spirit Prophecy, but I looked up online, what is the purpose of life? I just typed that into the search engine, and it came up with, I found this article that had 16 famous people saying what they thought the purpose of life was. It was interesting. So basically, at the end, they summed it up in, it all comes down to one thing, feeling good. And I'm like, that is completely opposite of what I found in the Bible and Spirit of Prophecy. So, first, let's go to Ecclesiastes 12, verse 13. And it says, "Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man." So, that's an interesting thought. So, fear God and keep his commandments. And so when I was thinking about that, what is included in fearing God and what is included in keeping his commandments? So, the verse I immediately thought of for fearing God was Revelation 14, verse 7. You can go there, which says, "Fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come, and worship him who made the heaven, the earth, the seas, and the fountains of water." And so I was like, okay, fear God and give glory to him. I also thought of the verse in 1 Corinthians 10:31, which says, "Whether you eat or drink or whatsoever you do, do all to the glory of God." So it's like, okay, all of our life should be to the glory of God. When it comes to keeping the commandments, though, I was thinking about Matthew 22:37 through 40, where Jesus is asked, what are the two greatest commandments? And it says, "Jesus said unto him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment, and the second is like unto it. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the laws and the prophets." So the commandments can be summed up with love to God, the first 4, and love to man, the last 6. And so how is love manifested? Let's go to 1 John 4, verse 9. It says, "In this was manifested the love of God toward us, because that God sent his only begotten Son into the world, that we might have life through him." So God manifested his love by sending his Son to die for us. How are we to manifest our love? It's in 1 John 3:18. It says, "My little children, let us not love in word, neither in tongue, but in deed and in truth." So I was curious to see, what does Ellen White say about this verse? And the first quote I found was in Acts of the Apostles. And I was reading this in the car when we were driving home from somewhere. And it made my mouth drop open. I was just like, it very much surprised me. So it says, it's from Acts of the Apostles, page 551, paragraph 1. It says, "Let us not love in word," the apostle writes, "but in deed and in truth. The completeness of Christian character is attained when the impulse to help and bless others springs constantly from within." It is the atmosphere of this love surrounding the soul of the believer that makes him a savor of life unto life and enables God to bless his work. That just struck me as very interesting because I never heard the completeness of Christian character is attained when the impulse to help and bless others springs constantly from within. That was just a very new thought to me, kind of, because I'd always when you're young, you hear help your mommy, whatever, But it's that just struck me as interesting. So far we found that the purpose of life includes two things: fearing God and giving glory to him, and also keeping his commandments, loving God and loving man, not only in word, but by helping and blessing our fellow man in whatever way we can. So Jesus is our example, and we should yet be able to discover what the purpose of life is by studying his life. What was his purpose? So let's go to John 17, verse 4. So it says, I have glorified thee on earth. I have finished the work which thou gavest me to do. So Jesus glorified the Father while on this earth. And let's go to Philippians 2, verse 11. And that says, and every tongue shall confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. So he did all things to glorify his Father. And John 10:10 says, the thief cometh not, but to steal, and to kill, and to destroy. I am come that they might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly. So he came to give us life. He came to bless others, and all throughout his life, you can see from the things he did, that he was a constant blessing to everyone around him. From the Desire of Ages, page 74.4, it says, the Savior condescended to poverty, that he might teach how closely we in a humble lot may walk with God. He lived to please, honor, and glorify his Father in the common things of life. So, he lived to glorify his Father. And so it was funny because I found when I was reading in Ellen White's writings that all the different quotes I found, that they lined up with the two different things that I had found from the Bible, that the purpose of life is to glorify God and to bless others. And so in Desire of Ages 70.2 it says, apart from the unholy ways of the world, he gathered stores of scientific knowledge from nature. He studied the life of plants and animals and the life of man. From his earliest years he was possessed of one purpose. He lived to bless others. For this he found resources in nature, new ideas of ways, and means flashed into his mind as he studied plant life and animal life. And so what was interesting in this is one of the things that they said in their article was that the purpose of life is to be happy. But the more I studied from Bible and Spirit of Prophecy what actually the purpose of life is, I found that lots of the time Ellen White would link the purpose of life, if we follow our true purpose of life, to glorify God and to bless others, then we will be happy. And so this is Desire of Ages 74.1, it says, Jesus was the fountain of healing mercy for the world, and through all these secluded years at Nazareth, his life flowed in currents of sympathy and tenderness. The aged, the sorrowing, the sin-burdened, the child at play in their innocent joy, the little creatures of the groves, the patient beasts of burden, all were happier in his presence. So one other quote, this is interesting. It says, whatsoever ye would that man would do unto you, do ye also to them. Matthew 7, verses 12. Blessed results would appear as the fruit of such course. With what measure ye mete, it shall be measured to you again. Here are strong motives which should constrain us to love one another with a pure heart, fervently. Christ is our example. He went about doing good. He lived to bless others. Love beautified and ennobled all of his actions. And so it was interesting because that quote started with Matthew 7:12 and talking about like the golden rule. And so I found another quote that also started with the same verse. But it says something interesting about this. It says, "All things whatsoever ye would that men should do unto you, do ye even so to them." Matthew 7:12. The Savior taught this principle to make mankind happy, not unhappy, for in no other way can happiness come. So happiness comes when we are a blessing to other people and help them, which makes sense because if you've ever done like outreach and like different things like that, you're always like, you enjoy that and you're more happy after you do something for others. This was interesting. It was in a letter. I found this letter that's talking to this woman who was apparently very self-centered, and it was a very interesting letter. It's in Daughters of God, page 169 and 170. It says, "Our notions, our peculiarities are wholly human and must not be humored or indulged. Self is to be crucified, not now and then, but daily. And the physical, mental, and spiritual must be subordinate to the will of God. The glory of God, the perfection of Christian character, is to be the aim, the purpose of our life. Christ's followers must imitate Christ in disposition. The pattern is given us to copy, and no excuse will be accepted of God as a reason for not meeting the divine standard, however contrary it may be to our own nature, our selfish desires and inclinations. Like Christ is the watchword, not like your father or your mother, but like Jesus Christ, hid in Christ, clothed with Christ's righteousness, imbued with the Spirit of Christ." So that quote, it was interesting because it said the glory of God and the perfection of Christian character is to be the aim, the purpose of our life. But the quote we read earlier from Acts of the Apostles said that the completeness of Christian character is attained when the impulse to help and bless others springs constantly from within. And so the glory of God and the perfection of Christian character. That was an interesting connection to me. Every one of his children must be like Christ, who lived not to please himself. Symmetry of character we must have in order to stand before the Son of Man. Jesus wants you to be happy, but you cannot be happy in having your own way and following the impulse of your own heart. When reading things about happiness, it was interesting because I was looking at different things. There's a whole chapter in Mind, Character, and Personality about happiness. And one thing, it was saying that happiness and health are linked together, and you can't have true health without having true happiness. It was interesting. I was like,
do you have that book?
Yes, it's Mind, Character, and Personality. Second volume of Mind, Character, and Personality, 641.2. It says, "So closely is health related to our happiness that we cannot have the latter without the former." So a lot that I found in the Ellen White quotes was we need to be like Christ, follow his example. So this is another quote from 7 MR 151.1. It says, "Keep your eyes fixed on Christ. Study his life, a life filled with goodness, grace, and truth. Follow his example. Ask yourself, am I in purpose and character like Christ?" The contemplation of the Savior will attract you more and more strongly to him. It is the beholding of the love of Jesus that gives light and life to the soul. Study the excellence of the character of Christ. Remember that to him has been given all power. This power is for you, if you will have it. As you become a humble, faithful witness for Christ, you will be able to say, "Thy gentleness has made me great." So this quote was actually like one of the first ones I found that actually led me to pursue the idea of glorifying God and to bless others is the purpose of our life. So this is from Review and Herald, June 3rd, 1880, paragraph 7. No man can succeed in the service of God unless his whole soul is in the work, and he counts all things but loss for the excellency of the knowledge of Christ. Whoever makes any reserve, whoever refuses to give all that he has, cannot be the disciple of Christ, much less his co-laborer. The consecration must be complete. Father, mother, wife, and children, houses and lands, everything which the servant of Christ possesses, must be held subject to God's call, bound upon the sacred altar. He must be earnest, he must be willing to deny self and lift the cross, to do and suffer cheerfully and with fortitude whatever may be required of him to push forward the great work of reform. The glory of God and the salvation of souls will be his great aim and purpose of life. He will not go here and there to please himself, but when duty calls, he will be found, if need be, in the thickest of the fight, and will suffer without reluctance, without repining, irrespective of worldly interest or personal consequences. All this we pledge ourselves to do when we accept the name of Christian, and more especially when we consent to take upon ourselves the work of Christ's ambassadors. So that one, it was fun because I asked my mom and my sister what they thought the purpose of life was. And so my mom said the first part of the quote, and my sister said the second part. My mom said, like, fear God and keep his commandments, so the glory of God. And then Julianne said that it was to share Jesus with as many people as possible. And so I was like, that, combine those two and it's the quote. So yeah, this study has like given me a new perspective kind of on like life in a way, because whenever I'm like going to be around large groups of people, I'm always like, I don't like large groups of people. And so I'd always be thinking like, what do I do? And so after studying this, I'm like, now I know what to do. The purpose is to glorify God and to bless others. I just have to figure out how to do that. So, yeah, I've enjoyed this. Dear Jesus, thank you so much for this day. Thank you for all the wonderful truths in your word and in the spirit of prophecy, and please help us to learn to put these into practice. And please bless us for the rest of our day, whatever we do. In your name, amen.